Hello and welcome to Vacation Bible School. 2 fish, 5 loaves, 1 Lord. Today we celebrate that Jesus is the very bread of life, meaning that Jesus provides us everything we need. And so we thought it would be a lot of fun to make flatbread, because that's the kind of bread Jesus would have eaten and shared back in Bible times. Now, in order for us to make flatbread, a couple of things. First, it's going to be very easy, but number 2, be sure you do this with your parents, because the stove is hot and a cast iron skillet is heavy. So let's get started. What will we need? First of all, we'll need cooking spray. We'll need olive oil. Baking powder. Salt. Now, please use table salt. If you don't have table salt, yes, you can use kosher salt or sea salt, but it will actually turn out better with just regular old salt. We'll also need Greek yogurt. Now you can't see maybe, but I've already spooned out a half a cup of Greek yogurt into this measuring cup. Just remember, plain, regular Greek yogurt, not low fat or flavored. We need all-purpose flour. This is a cup. Please measure out a cup of all-purpose flour. And we'll need a teaspoon, a rolling pin, a wooden spoon or a large stirring spoon. We'll need a spatula, a couple of bowls, and a cast iron skillet. And it has to be a pretty good size cast iron skillet. Okay, now we know what it is we need. So how are we going to make our flatbread? The first thing we do in one of the bowls is to take the cup of all-purpose flour and pour it in. That was easy. Now we're going to measure baking powder. It's 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And so I've got my teaspoon measure. And they usually have a nice lip on the can to make it really easy to get exactly what you need. That's 1. Now I'm just going to do half. You probably have a half teaspoon measurement, but I don't like to dirty more than 1 at a time. So there's my half. All right. And we need to put 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, don't pour over your mixing bowl, because if you accidentally pour too much, it's really hard to get salt back out of a recipe. So pouring over the table, pouring a teaspoon of salt. There it is. And I've poured it into the bowl. Now what you want to do is just take those 3 ingredients and mix them up a little bit. You don't have to go stir crazy. Just mix them up a little. All right. Now what we need to do is add about a teaspoon of oil to this bowl. And you know, it's easier just to do a splash. Just take it and go, boop, just a splash. That's easier than trying to pour into a teaspoon. And then you can take the teaspoon measure you already used and use it to dump this Greek yogurt into the bowl. Now, Greek yogurt's a little sticky, so Don't worry if a little gets left inside the measuring cup. There, it's empty. And I'm going to use my wooden spoon to get the last little bit out from the spoon I used as a scoop. There. All right, now what we want to do is stir and mix until this starts to come together. There's the yogurt and the oil in with all the flour. So we're just going to stir it, and the yogurt wants to all stay together in a clump, but don't let it. Stir, 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 stir. And then when you get to the part where there's a bunch of little pieces, it's just as easy to take your hands and kind of mash it together. And you notice I'm squeezing it a little with my fingers and trying to get it to clump up. Well, I can see that it's not coming together as well as I would like. That means we need a little water. So I'm going to take my teaspoon and pour water in it a little bit at a time. Okay, I put about 2 or 3 teaspoons of water. And now it's coming together really well. Now, what happens if yours is still too dry, as mine is? I think I'll go back and do 1 more teaspoon of water. I've put 1 more teaspoon in, and now I'm just mashing it up. See how I'm mashing it together? Oh, and that's coming together in a nice little ball. See there? All right. Now I'm going to spread flour on my working surface. Now, if you're at home and there's no good place to roll this out, you can take a cutting board, especially if it's a good size one, and put a moist hand towel on the counter or a table, and then put a cutting board on top of it, and then it won't move around. But I've got a nice aluminum table here. Then take your dough ball out of the bowl and try to get all the little pieces that you can. You don't have to be obsessive, but as much as you can, get it out of there. Now you see, instead of my face, you see the flour on this working surface. Don't use too much flour, just use it so that you can just roll this around and mash it up. Now mine is starting to get plenty solid, so I'm going to slide a little of the flour away so it doesn't get too much. And see what I'm doing? I'm just pushing it out with my palm, folding it back. And when it gets too skinny, get a little flour on there, I just fold it back and start doing it all over again. Push with the palm, pull back. And anything that sticks to the counter, I try to get it back, reclaim it, and make it part of my dough. If the dough's too sticky, use a little extra flour. And you just knead this until it makes a beautiful ball. Keep folding it over, pushing it with your palm, folding it back, pushing it with your palm. All right. I think this is perfect because it is still a little sticky, but not so sticky that it sticks to my hands. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this bowl and we're going to spray it lightly, very lightly with cooking spray. We're going to put the ball in going to spray it lightly. And then all you have to do is put a little bit of saran wrap, or you can put a plate on top of it. I don't do well with saran wrap, so I'm just putting a plate on top of mine. Okay, now what we do is we wait about 30 minutes and come back. Lots of magic will happen in the next 30 minutes. Well, now I'm back, and we have our bowl with the plate on top, and it has been sitting for about a half an hour. And so we open it up now, and the dough is nice and soft and pliable. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut it in half. Now, I don't like to dirty too many things when I'm cooking, so instead of a knife, I'm just going to use the spatula that we'll be using later, and I'll separate it in the middle there. And there it is. And I'm going to make one of them into a ball. And I'm going to put it back into the bowl, and I'm just going to lightly spray it. That's just so it stays nice and moist. Now I'm going to take the other ball, well, it's not a ball yet, the other piece of dough, and I'm going to form it into a nice bowl. Form it into a nice ball. I'm going to form it into a nice ball and then flatten it. All right, see how nice and flat it is? Now, my surface has a light layer of flour on it. And that's so that when I roll out this little piece of dough, it's not going to stick to my counter. Then I'll take the rolling pin and roll it out. Now, if you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a drinking glass. You can use the side of a wine bottle, not if it still has wine in it, of course. And you roll this out on all ends. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. And this is about the right size. It's just a little smaller than a paper plate. And now it's ready to go into our cast iron skillet. Here's our cast iron skillet. Remember what I said about a splash of oil? I'm just going to do a little splash. And then I roll it around a little bit. Take my fingers. Make sure the oil touches everywhere. Now I'm going to move it to the stove. All right, you see my hot pan, and I'm using medium heat. Now, here at the church where I'm cooking, it's a little tougher because this stove has only two temperatures, off or hot as a volcano. So I'm trying to be very careful not to burn this bread. Please hope that this turns out well. Okay, here we go. I'm going to put the bread down. That's pretty easy, isn't it? Now we're just going to let that sit until bubbles start to form on top of the bread. Maybe you can see the bubbles. Let's look and see how it's going on the bottom. Oh, it's looking good, but it still needs a little more time. Let's check it again. Oh, look at that. Just a few more moments. I think you can probably see the bubbles pretty well now. There's a big one right there. Okay, let's turn her over. Oh, look at that color. Now, we're only going to have it on the frying pan for a short time on this other side because it's already probably baked all the way through. Let me check it. It's getting there. I think it's just about time for us to check. Let's look. Oh, that's perfect. A perfect flatbread. Now, I just take it, put it on a plate, and I'm ready to bake the next ball of dough into delicious flatbread. So that's how easy it is to make real flatbread the way they would have made it in the time of Jesus. Remember, Jesus is the bread of life and provides for all of our needs. And our theme this week, 2 fish, 5 loaves, 1 Lord.